Yeah, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Breaking Barriers, Reaching the Hard to Reach webinar. Then we have Josie.
Okay, thank you so much, Miriam. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. My name is Josie Badger, and I am the co-director of the RAISE Center, which provides technical assistance on transition for RSA parent centers, RSA PTIs, youth and families. We are funded through RSA, and I just personally want to thank our presenters and our staff for putting this together. This seems like it's going to be the largest webinar we've had so far, so that's really exciting. And along with myself, the other individuals that work for RAISE are Peg Kinzel, who is my co-director, Deborah, who is the co-director of SPAN, Jessica, who's the communications director, and Donna and Miriam, who do all of the behind the scenes communication, technical assistance, and making sure that everything runs smoothly. Go ahead. So the National RAISE Technical Assistance Center wants to welcome you to this webinar, Breaking Barriers, Reaching the Hard to Reach. I was told about this presentation that was presented at the NEPAC conference and got raving reviews, and so I wanted to make sure that more individuals got a chance to hear it as well, and we are really grateful for our panelists for presenting with us today. Go ahead, Maria. So, presented by the New York Region Parent Training Information Center. I am going to let the presenters introduce themselves. I think that they can give you a little bit better information about themselves, but we are grateful for all of them, and they're all from New York and from various regions of New York and serve different populations. Go ahead, Maria. So, the workshop overview. Participants will explore creative models and best practices to reach families that have historically been underserved, learn strategies for bridging cultural, racial, and linguistic differences, as well as approaches for overcoming challenges posed by the child welfare system and parental incarceration. And finally, learn practices that include programs targeting Spanish-speaking families, Native American families, parents of children in foster care, and parents who are incarcerated. Go ahead, Maria.
Okay, so we would like everybody to please answer this poll. I'll read the questions. Are you attending this webinar as a Parent Center staff member, youth, young adult with disabilities, parent of an individual with disabilities, advocate for or with individual with disabilities, or as a service provider, educator, or TA provider? Please go ahead and vote, and we'll give a few minutes until it closes. It's still collecting the responses. Just a few more seconds. Okay, it looks like everybody has answered, so we will show the results. So mostly parent staff members. We don't have any individuals with disabilities, but we have several parents, advocates, and as well as service providers. So that's excellent. Thank you. And now we're going to start with INCLUDEnyc or INCLUDEnyc. And I'd like to introduce Alfonso Guzman from INCLUDEnyc. Alfonso? Next slide.
Yes, hi. Thank you. Thank you for having me. The INCLUDEnyc, I just want to share, is our sister brand for INCLUDEnyc. This is our approach to reaching Spanish-speaking communities in New York City. Again, my name is Alfonso Guzman, and I'm the currently a family educator at INCLUDE. I also manage the New York State Promise Project, as well as the CPRC project in New York City. So if I don't know how many of you may or may not know this, but New York City is made up of several unique boroughs, and one of the things that we understand about these boroughs is that within these boroughs exist pockets of small communities within larger communities, and some of these communities are made up of people from all over the world, pretty much. But in regards to our Spanish-speaking demographics, the families that we predominantly have come into contact with are usually from the Dominican Republic, Mexico, Puerto Rico, and countries in Central America, such as Guatemala, El Salvador, Honduras, and Nicaragua, among others. So this is pretty much our target population when as it relates, or as it connects to our work at INCLUDE. So we could go ahead and move on to the next slide. And some of the things that we have come to learn from our interactions with families in these communities is that very often they rarely seek out supports from organizations like ours, and mostly rely on information that they come to learn off of each other. And very often that information speaks only to the particular issue or experience that that one family is having, and it isn't a true representation of the services or access to services that other families can have to address their particular need. And this is mostly due to the fact that their immigration status is of concern, so they don't reach out to organizations like ours or any others for that matter. They're rarely the information that is available is rarely culturally appropriate, let alone linguistically appropriate. We also have noticed that among many of the families from in these communities, there's also a big cultural stigma associated with having a disability, and again, very often because they don't interact or because information also isn't readily available in an easy to understand way, they rarely know about services and supports that exist. And very often it's also ties in to the fact that the service was also something that wasn't available in their country of origin, so they make a lot of assumptions of what they may have access to here in the States. We can go ahead and move on to the next slide. So some of the components to our model, some of the things that we strive for, is ensuring that resources that we do come up with or we do develop, and those could come in the form of workshops, tip sheets, or documents to help support the information that we're conveying at workshops or when we meet with families on one-to-one situations, is that the resources speak to the unique needs of the Spanish-speaking community. So we're not just looking to grab a document and have a literal translation of that document. We want it to speak to the actual unique need of the family. That applies to our online or our social media platforms. We also tend to we have gravitated more towards the use of WhatsApp as a medium to connect families to information. We know that there's very often our Spanish-speaking communities are using WhatsApp. We also have bilingual staff in every part of the organization throughout various programs and departments. Many of the staff that are working on the different projects that we have are also staff that come from those communities. So they're very much not just in touch with the culture as it speaks to the Latino community, but also in touch with the communities, with the neighborhoods. And then we're also out there in the communities participating in larger meetings or larger sessions where we can interact with organizations that are in the community so that we can help them kind of get a sense of what the need is in those communities. So we can go ahead and move to the next slide. Okay, and just to give you a snapshot of some of the successes that we've had over the year from having our sister brand INCLUDEnyc, we've reached 38%. We've seen an increase in the Spanish language helpline calls from year to year, and by 38%. We also had a 268% increase in attendance at Spanish language only workshops. And we've also seen an increase in our social media following. That's in the form of Twitter and Facebook accounts. Our INCLUDEnyc Facebook reach has gone from 4,824 to 18,443 from year to year. So we've seen a pretty significant increase in the amount of Spanish-speaking families that we actually have had an opportunity to engage. And then just very quickly, we have we shared a success story, which is that of the Bonifacio family. It's a parent who is from Honduras, who is she's a single parent, and she's raising two adolescents, one adolescent male and one adolescent female. And one of the things that we helped her get connected with is extra layers of support from the Family Assistance Program, which is a program in New York City that allows families to get connected to more intensive type of case management services, as well as get connected to counseling as needed, and offers other layers of support that have really brought the Bonifacio family to where they want it to be. And that's been over the course of I want to say over the course of a year, of last year. So they are very they're doing quite well for themselves. So we really are very happy with the work that we've allowed ourselves to do with the Bonifacio family, or that they've allowed us to do with them. And we can go ahead and move to the next slide. So some of the challenges and some of the continued challenges that we see with our families is, or in our Spanish-speaking communities, is they're still very much unaware of what their rights are and how to exercise them in regards to ICE involvement. We are also continuing to realize that it's going to, we just kind of scratched the surface in connecting with Spanish-speaking communities. A lot of these neighborhoods or a lot of these communities are very tight-knit communities where information and outsiders aren't always welcomed, and that might be because of fear of documentation status, or it could be because they're just, they don't know what the intentions are of those organizations or of those people that are coming into those communities. So our Spanish-speaking communities, we have a lot of trauma in our Spanish community, a lot of cultural things that they have come to the States with that need to be addressed. And again, we're linguistically, we try to keep things neutral. We try to keep things so that it speaks to all the many different dialects that exist in these communities. And we also, again, strive to get information in their hands that is in their native language. And again, it's more than just translating documents. It's about making the information readily available so that it can be understood and that they can actually put it to good use to get them to where they want to be. Okay, we can move on to the next slide, please. Okay, so some of the takeaways that we were able to learn was that having only program staff who can serve families is not enough. We need to support families in their native language at every step of the process. We found it very valuable to partner with private and public organizations, as they have been very helpful in in working with our families, and we want to help them to become culturally and linguistically responsive to our Spanish-speaking communities. And we also need to understand both cultural and immigration and disability family circumstances, and connect families through local community organizations, and even tap into those houses of worship. And a lot of our communities, and a lot of our Spanish-speaking communities, houses of worship are a place where they go to get information, to get support. So we're one of the things that we want to do more is be on the ground in those places so that we can get the information to families that will help them become stronger advocates for their children and for themselves. So having said that, I now turn to, and we could turn the slide, I'm going to now turn to Advocates for Children of New York. I'm going to turn it over to Michelle Eaton.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Michelle Eaton, and I'm a Senior Education Specialist at Advocates for Children. Our organization was founded approximately 40 years ago, and we really work with kids who have disabilities, their parents, and school systems in the New York City area. Our goal is to provide services for families with students with disabilities, and we have a number of different projects, including my project, which is called Project Achieve, and that deals with students in foster care. We also have a helpline. We also service students who are homeless, who are immigrants, early education, childhood issues, and students who have disciplinary concerns and may need assistance in suspensions and other disciplinary hearings. For today's purposes, we're going to talk about my work with parents who are incarcerated and how we best try to service their needs. Next slide. The reason why I started on this project was because we had a number of parents who were incarcerated, and we were trying to get special education services for their child who was in foster care. But just to give you an overview of the target population, we have about 2 million children in the United States have an incarcerated parent, and approximately 10 million children have experienced parental incarceration at some point in their lives. In terms of the breakdown, in terms of ethnicity, 1 in 15 Black children, 1 in 42 Latino children, and 1 in 111 white children have a parent in prison. Next slide. As I began with my department trying to figure out some of the initial challenges in reaching this population, some of our initial challenges included working with many agencies. We work with the DOE, the Department of Education, Administration for Children's Services, and various community-based organizations. We also had a lot of incomplete data from the DOE on the percentage of families who were impacted by incarceration. Students and or parents do not always want to report if they have a family member who's incarcerated. So in terms of the work that we were trying to do, we were always concerned that we weren't reaching all of the students and parents that we needed to reach. But we also have to maintain their confidentiality if they did not want to report this particular status. We also have to deal with a lot of issues with training staff about the rights of birth parents who are incarcerated to make education decisions for their child. Many of the foster care staff who work for the foster care agencies would make the assumption that birth parents, if they were incarcerated, they could not make special education decisions. And so my agency, we had to create a series of staff trainings to basically tell them that birth parents do have rights, and even if they're incarcerated, they should be involved in the case planning in terms of making educational decisions for their children as appropriate. Another challenge we dealt with, and again, this was for both foster care staff as well as school staff, there were a lot of stereotypes about incarcerated parents. We had to overcome inaccurate beliefs that that parents could not be involved in child rearing, that their lifestyle would be passed on to their children, and that they did not have any legal rights to make certain decisions. And this is something that's definitely an ongoing challenge. And we've created fact sheets for both the agencies and the schools on how to work with incarcerated parents. And then finally, in order to actually do the trainings, I had to develop partnerships with a local facility to get their permission to do the parent trainings. Next slide. The basic components of the model is, number one, you want to identify the need to assist the hard-to-reach populations in a more proactive manner. There are a number of special education issues for youth in foster care, and this was the original reason why we said we need to reach out to the partner agency for guidance. We would want to get an evaluation, or we would want to apply, to a particular private school. If there was a disciplinary hearing, we needed permission from the birth parents, and there was a struggle to get in contact with them. And so we had to have a meeting with the foster care agencies and say, this is what we need to do better to reach this population. And one of the reasons why we did this was because we know that a lot of times the special education process would come to a standstill. The child would still act out in school, the child would still not be able to be evaluated, and they basically couldn't be helped if the consent to start the special education process wasn't begun. So we began to develop partnerships with reputable CBOs who were experts in the field, and they were instrumental in starting to provide access to this population. Our particular partnership with the Osborne Association was crucial. They really educated us on the best ways to reach these particular parents. They told us strategies, they gave us advice, and they really just were wonderful in allowing us to be educated on the best ways to deal with incarcerated parents. And you definitely want to learn as much as possible about the issues facing incarcerated parents. So again, with the Osborne Association, they have quarterly partner meetings, and we would regularly attend these meetings, as well as any events that they would host as well, in order to allow us to do crucial networking. And then finally, you want to stay up to date on policy and legislative issues, which change year to year depending on the legislative session in Albany. And so every year there are new priorities that we set along with the other partners who attend the quarterly meetings with the Osborne Association. And when you stay up to date, it makes it more crucial in terms of the things that you're going to prioritize and how to better reach this particular population. Next slide. So we've had a lot of success as we've incorporated this model. We began, I would say, about 3 to 4 years ago, and since that time, Advocates for Children, we've been able to facilitate trainings within local facilities at least twice a year. I'm actually going to be doing some in March and April. We have gotten the birth parents who are incarcerated more aware of their legal rights. This, to me, on a personal level, has been very empowering. When I go in and do the trainings, the parents, they don't even know that there are laws that apply to them and apply to their situation, and allowing them to know that they have rights, even though they're not, a traditional parent in the sense of not seeing their kids every day. They can still take an active role if their rights have not been terminated. There are state laws that protect their rights as incarcerated parents. And you should check your own state to make sure that there are applicable laws, because it does change from state to state. Foster care staff that we've been working with, they definitely receive ongoing training and guidance on how to work with incarcerated parents. We have created a fact sheet that's actually one of the handouts at the end of the presentation for distribution, and it's also posted on our website, www.advocatesforchildren.org. And finally, we participate in an ongoing subcommittee with various community-based organizations, ACS, which is the convening agency that deals with children who are in child welfare in New York City, as well as Department of Education staff on how to best meet the needs of incarcerated parents. We have some long-term goals, and they include updating the Department of Education website to include resources for families, and continuing to train Department of Education staff to interact with incarcerated parents in a more impactful way. Next slide. We do have some continuing challenges despite our various successes. Number one, we're trying to increase trainings outreach to more incarcerated parents. while trying to work with certain agencies that may have many bureaucratic hurdles. I have made contacts on the city level in terms of doing trainings, and we're trying to make some state contacts with the Department of Corrections, along with some other state level agencies to do these trainings on a statewide level. But it takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of meetings, and they have a lot of state bureaucratic laws and regulations that have to be followed, and so it's not so easy. But I'm hopeful that we'll continue to make some progress. And then we definitely need to streamline the sharing of data between the many agencies, especially when there are confidentiality issues. The data that we get from the DOE, it's not always the most up-to-date, and the ACS data can't always be shared with different agencies because they have to maintain the confidentiality of children who are in care. And so we are developing techniques and having meetings on how do we share this data? Can there be MOUs, memorandums of understanding, that are developed between agencies? Right now, there's an MOU between the DOE and ACS, but how do private agencies, such as our agency, get access to the same data? And then the third issue that we deal with, which is constantly an issue, is there's a lot of staff turnover in foster care agencies. Staff gets burnt out. There are many hurdles with caseloads and pay, and so we have to do a lot of times the same training over and over again to new staff. And so in terms of capacity building, that can be a little difficult. And then finally, school staff is often unaware of birth parents' legal rights to make educational decisions. This is definitely, with over 1,600 public schools in New York City, is definitely an area that requires, just planning and outreach. We're one agency. We're a fairly small agency. There's no way we can do outreach to all the public schools, and so we need to develop some collaborative outreach strategies on how to educate school staff. Because if I don't have a particular case or I don't have a particular connection with the school, then it's hard for that school staff to be educated. And so trying to figure out some long-term goals on how to reach more schools is definitely one of our challenges. Next slide. And just some final key takeaways when you're working with this population. Definitely partner with an agency that has knowledge about this issue. There's so much that I learned about incarceration and about policy reform and about criminal justice issues, things that weren't originally a part of my job description, but it made me more informed as I developed trainings and as I tried to develop outreach strategies to reach this particular population. So you want to partner with an expert in the field around criminal justice reform or around how to get birth parents more involved when they're incarcerated. You definitely want to have persistence and patience in collaborating with multiple agencies. Different people from different agencies have different priorities and different agendas that they're trying to accomplish. There's some compromise, there's some give and take. You're not always going to be able to get what you exactly want, and you just have to be open to compromising and just having a lot of patience. And then to me, this is like the most important part. Impacted parents, they should definitely have an active voice in programmatic planning and legislative advocacy efforts. It's one thing to speak about issues as a professional. It's another totally different dynamic when an impacted parent speaks out. So when we have legislation that we want to introduce, or if we need a speaker, we always try to go to the parents first, and if they're available and we're able to get their feedback and insight, we always want to allow their voices to be heard first. And then finally, you want to remain committed to reaching incarcerated parents despite the high foster care staff agency staff turnover and the bureaucratic challenges with working with many different agencies. If there are any questions, I'll take them at the end of the presentation. And I just want to thank you for this time.
We now have one more poll, and I will launch the poll, which asks, are you familiarized with specific population outreach strategies in your organization, parent center, or community? Yes, no, or not much? I'll wait a few seconds. Okay, it looks like everyone is done. So half of the people said yes, a small amount no, and the other almost half not much. So, okay, great. And just for the people who are submitting questions, at the end of the presentation, we will have the panelists answer those questions. And so now I would like to move on and introduce Don Lash from Sinergia. And here we go.
Good afternoon. My name is Don Lash. I'm the executive director of Sinergia, which provides a range of services and supports to individuals with disabilities and their families, primarily in the area of developmental disabilities. But we also have the Metropolitan Parent Center, which is our PTI as part of the collaborative, and that serves the full range of disability. And in the 40 years or so that Sinergia has been in existence, it's traditionally served culturally and linguistically diverse families in New York City, with a very, very high proportion of Spanish-speaking families, and that's been the case with the Metropolitan Parent Center. The population that we're talking about today is parents of children and youth in foster care, and obviously there's quite a bit of overlap with the group that Michelle's working with of incarcerated parents, and probably with other hard to reach populations that are being discussed, because people may be hard to reach for a number of different reasons and may have different aspects of their identity that put them in that position. And just for context, when we talk about children and youth in foster care, there's a significant overrepresentation of children and youth in foster care in special education. There are several reasons for that. I think that for one thing, the child welfare system is populated by Black and brown families and Black and brown children are also significantly overrepresented in certain categories of special education and in the most restrictive settings. So there's some overlapping patterns of disproportionality there. There are also different classification patterns for children and youth in foster care. The most common classification for school-age children in the general population is learning disabled. In foster care, the most common classification for school-age children by far is emotional disturbance. And there isn't reliable national data or even local data, partly for the reason that Michelle mentioned about the difficulty of getting systems to share data. But the last time the data was analyzed for school-age children, between 30 and 40% of kids in foster care who were school-age were receiving special education services. And that was actually a bit of an undercount because it excluded kids who were in residential treatment and kids who were in non-public settings. And it also didn't include preschool or early intervention, where there's also overrepresentation because, or disproportional representation, because federal law requires that children in foster care be developmentally monitored, making them more likely to be identified. So at any given time in New York City, you're talking in the thousands of kids receiving some type of either early childhood or school age special services. But in order to serve parents of children and youth in foster care, you've got to serve other populations, people that exercise power over them. So you've got to be able to reach with information parents, attorneys, legal service social workers, parent advocates. You've got to reach the children's attorneys, Legal Aid Society, and other sources of representation for children, and their support workers and their educational advocates, foster care caseworkers and service providers, attorneys representing the city, representing the child welfare agency, and the policymakers who administer the system. You've got to reach the judges because they exercise tremendous power over parents. And you've also got to reach school personnel because, as Michelle pointed out, they don't always know what the law provides for consent, what the law provides for the involvement of a birth parent in educational decision making. So you can go to the next slide. In terms of initial challenges, one of the problems is the difficulty of reaching parents. Reaching parents is always challenging, but for parents of kids in care, they may not be seeking assistance on educational issues because they may not know what's going on. They may have been excluded from the process. They may have limited information. They may be working on other things. And that gets into the competing pressures relating to family court involvement. A lot of demands are made on parents when they become part of the system. They may be, being sent to anger management class, whether they need it or not. They may be going to parenting class, whether they need it or not. They may have a lot of other things that the court is requiring them to do. They may be running to visits with their child. They may also have to maintain stable employment in order to get adequate housing to show that they're ready for their kids to come home. So it's difficult for them to find the time for traditional parent training, for workshops, to seek out information on the web, that type of stuff. There's also the clash of culture between systems because, we're used to a model under IDEA of the parent being a participant in planning and as the ultimate decision maker. Family court is more about doing compliance. That's the phrase that's used, and it means, are you doing everything that's being asked of you in order to get your kids back, to show that you're ready to get your kids back? So very often when the two systems come up with a point of decision making, like education, they may be looking at it the same way they look at medical care. Are you following the advice of the professionals? And if the parent appears to not want to go along, appears to have a different perspective, wants to ask a lot of questions, that can look like they're being obstructive. And so educating the system about the fact that actually if the parent is asking questions and exercising her intelligence about her child and her knowledge of her child, she's doing what the law intends her to do, what IDEA always intended parents to do. So bringing those two systems together and meshing the cultures can be difficult. The need for customized content in groups. If you're training parents who are involved with child welfare, again, the context is everything. The context is going to determine how decisions can be made, how things can be arranged, how consent will be provided, how a surrogate decision maker, if one is needed, can be put in place. So you need to be able to address those issues with parents, otherwise the information you're giving them isn't going to be useful. You also may need to customize groups because it's difficult to integrate parents who don't have their children into a larger group of parents who may have the same judgments that those parents encounter everywhere they go. So a parent may not feel comfortable going to a training session and raising her hand and saying, well, I don't have my child, my child is in foster care because, they're different than the other participants. So finding ways to bring together groups where there's a shared knowledge and there's also a shared need for that customized content that's specific to the context of child welfare. And then getting buy-in from potential collaborators. If you need the cooperation of foster care agencies or advocacy groups, getting them to understand why it's to their benefit and the benefit of the individuals they serve to work together, because they may have pressures from their funding sources or pressures from the family court or something that will always take priority, but convincing them that it's worthwhile to take the time to work with us in order to give parents the tools to be full decision makers and full participants in the process can be a challenge. Okay, next slide. Okay, so the components of the model, which are still evolving. I mean, we're still working on this, but partnerships to facilitate outreach and group formation, finding out who the players are, who the stakeholders are that can help us form groups or that have groups of have an audience of birth parents that can almost form a pre-existing group. Analysis of access to stakeholders, who has the ability to get the attention of different players in the system, and who has the power to get to keep them interested in this topic among all the other topics that they may be dealing with, and what are the needs of the different stakeholders. So for example, if we want to work with a foster care agency, they may have a need to provide training to foster parents because they have to show a certain number of hours for them to be recertified. So if we can meet that need for them, that creates an incentive for them to work with us. A bi-directional flow of information. Just as we're educating the staff of workers within different parts of the child welfare system, our staff needs to become very well informed about how the child welfare system works and who is who. They need to know the difference between a case planner and the child's attorney and the city's attorney. What are the different perspectives represented by those people, and what power do they have over the parent? What influence do they have over the case? So it's an ongoing process of developing your own staff's knowledge of this parallel system that parents are enmeshed with. You also need an adaptable, high-quality curriculum. We're still in the process of tweaking the Apple Academy, which is advocacy for parents providing leadership in education. It's an intensive training series we've done for parents for probably 20 years. We just renamed it the Apple Academy as opposed to the intensive series, which is a terrible name. And we're revising the content. So we would use that as a baseline, and we need to introduce this new content that fits the need of a specific group or a specific population. In this case, parents of kids who are in foster care. And then networking for Apple Academy alumni, because we always envisioned that as parents providing support to other parents. So in this context, if there are parent advocates who've worked with a group and gotten leadership training on advocating for parents who are child welfare involved, giving them the additional tools so that they can be a resource on educational issues as well. Okay, next slide. Okay, the successes so far, we have a memorandum of understanding with the Child Welfare Organizing Project, CWOP, which is a grassroots parent organizing project that provides leadership training, it provides advocacy, it provides a safe space for parents to meet with other parents, outside the control of foster care agencies and the city and people who they may see as making demands on them. Here with CWOP, they know they're in friendly territory, and it makes them more receptive. So collaborating with them on customized training, recruitment is going to be very valuable. We have the agreement of ACS, the New York City Administration for Children's Services, to support outreach to the stakeholders who operate within their system. And then a development of a branding and marketing plan to, concisely explain what it is we're offering and why it makes sense for parents to participate. Next slide. Okay, continuing challenges. The labor intensity of activity, the subject matter is complex. You're including a lot more material in the training. It's easy to get bogged down. The need to build bigger groups while remaining timely, meaning that if a parent has to show that she's making progress in working toward reunification, they may want to see that they've accomplished something by the next court date. So, saying we want to wait until we have a critical mass to schedule a training may not work so well. So you may have to do a lot of work with smaller groups, with individual parents, a lot of smaller scale training in order to be timely. The complexity of interactions between the system, again, you can get bogged down in the detail of what goes into the permanency report in family court, and how consent was handled, or who the players are, even identifying the number of people who may be involved in a child's life. The outreach generates complex individual assistance requests. Again, if you're doing training, you've got to be able to offer the parent some quality information that's specific to the case that they're dealing with, the problem that they have right now. And you may have to take a lot of time in order to provide that individual assistance in order for them to see the more long-term benefit of training. And then ongoing professional development needs. On our end, we need to keep training our staff and retraining our staff on how to do this effectively, given the interaction of these two systems. Okay, next slide. And then the key takeaways, I have probably said it a couple of times, so I might as well say it again. Child welfare context influences every aspect of parent-centered activity when you're dealing with the parent of a child in foster care. It changes most of the issues that you're dealing with when you're speaking to a parent, and you do have to really understand the experience they're having with the child welfare system. Collaboration is most effective when institutional needs of each collaborator are understood and addressed. So, again, if you are dealing with foster care agencies, understanding what their charge is, what their mandate is, what their, who they're responsive to, the accountability they have to family court judges. Because if you understand where they're coming from, you can better make sure that you're able to serve, your purposes, the purposes that for which you're seeking collaboration, and their purposes at the same time. And then finally, sometimes it's about marketing. I think, the Apple Academy and developing a pitch that we can take across the city to multiple stakeholders and making it memorable is probably going to be very valuable in the long run. So I guess now it's over to Long Island Advocacy Center and Yvonne.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much, Don. I'm Yvonne Siniscali. I'm the bilingual advocacy trainer for LIAC. At the LIAC, we provide a range of services that includes coordination, information, referral, and technical assistance to help empower our families and individuals and those professionals in the special education process. So if you visit the liac.org, you can see the many services we offer. So today I'm going to be talking to you about Native American families on Long Island. That's our target population. We have two currently that are the Shinnecock and Puspatuck families that are on those reservations that are on Suffolk County, Long Island. And some of our challenges that we are facing are the awareness of parent centers, sustaining and having working relationships with our nearby tribes and villages. The families that have children with disabilities are unaware of a lot of the services and information that's available to them. And the process of building that commitment and nurturing those relationships has been somewhat of an initial challenge at the very beginning of starting this work. And as we know that a lot of this is going to take a lot of commitment and time on our part, and of course on the tribal communities. But through my training and learning about our Native American families, using these components of this model, it kind of breaks it down into 3 areas that have been pretty successful in some of the outcomes that you'll see later on. But one of the first ones in being is knowledge. And really expanding a self-awareness and understanding, and being candid about, who I am, and to the extent of what my cultural attitudes and beliefs, and even some of those behaviors, how will that impact my service delivery to Native American parents and the youth? Learning about Native American history and background. Prior to working with Native American families, I really need, and I find it very helpful if you can reflect on the limited knowledge that we might even have on Native history, and embracing new knowledge. Understanding values, recognizing the validity and integrity of traditional Native value systems is very important, and exploring Native current events, understanding how the historical trauma has influenced and impacted those communities as well. Skills is another great area to explore when doing this, increasing the number of Native American contacts locally, showing the relationships that we're able to sustain with the tribes and organizations, having outreach to local tribes, interacting with our families at health events, health fairs, powwows, informational sessions, and of course working side by side with the schools that service those children as well. Training our parent center coworkers on Native content, developing a training so that everyone is understanding the importance about learning the Native American cultures and appreciating what all the cultures have to offer. And that also includes training the families as well. And lastly, attitudes, remaining open to new ideas, engaging mentally and physically in that whole learning process, extending our awareness and the respect for Native American culture, new knowledge, so that we can navigate this work effectively and respectfully across Native American cultures and their communities as well. And lastly, increasing the comfort level when outreaching and talking to Native parents and youth. I've learned to really appreciate my interactions with Native families and becoming more grounded in cultural values and the different communication styles. I have found that sometimes, maybe it's being a New Yorker, speaking very quickly, using a lot of my hands. This comes very natural for me. That might be part of my culture, but in working with my Native American families, I've learned that I've had to slow down and limit some of my body language as I'm interacting with them. I don't know if it came off somewhat offensive, but it was more of an awareness of myself and understanding the people that I was training and working with. Next slide, please. So some of the successes that have come out of the model have been connecting with local chair people of our school districts that have students with disabilities. I've also was able to meet and have communication with the chief of our local tribe so that we're able to build that rapport and making a connection with the homeschool liaison at one of the districts. We've had a table at the health fair on the reservation, and we also attended, and where we got to speak to families and interacted with members of the community. We had a table also at a powwow on Labor Day weekend. We were able to communicate with chairpersons and local business members that also had participated at one of our trainings, and we were able to get some inside information, and then provide a Native American workshop, on FBA's, functional behavioral assessments and behavioral intervention plans for Native American families. Next slide, please. So some of our challenges that we still continue to face is finding cultural brokers so that we can continue to build those bridges and extend our work. The lack of continuous communication on both parts. Accurate contacts. At times we've seen some transition with different folks carrying different roles, and so it's been a little bit of a challenge to keep up with those changes. Establishing trust, whether that's been due to the lack of availability for face-to-face meetings, but that continues to be something that we're working on, and of course the lack of confidence from parents to engage and seek support from parent centers. They're unsure of how we can actually help, and if our services are going to be valued or of value for them down the road for their children. And then the next slide. So some of the takeaways from our work is to continue to do research, gain knowledge of the local tribe that you're working with. We cannot make assumptions that all tribes are the same. So that is definitely one of the key points that I'd like to stress here today. Conducting professional development for all staff, using our resources from NAPTAC. So for those of you that may not be familiar, we do have a Native American Parent Technical Assistance Center. They have been so valuable. They have been so supportive in the capacity to be able to do this work with Native American and Alaskan Native families. So I highly recommend that you check them out and use their resources and publications that they have available for all of us to use. Building a rapport and being persistent and consistent. As we know in our work, sometimes that can be a challenge just on itself, but that is something that I'm finding to be very important in working with our families. Be promise keepers, keep the momentum going, and create plans and build into our budgets to hopefully set new goals and be able to provide the information and the technical assistance to our Native American families, and of course seek out new funding sources in working with and able to do this work. Thank you.
And this is Michelle again. Basically, we wanted to discuss a few themes across the different models. The main thing we want to say is you definitely have to have a commitment. I think they're moving along the slide. The usual outreach methods are not enough. You have to have a targeted outreach plan. You have to think outside the box. How do you want to reach these populations? It's really a meeting of just being creative and innovative. Partnerships. Can't emphasize enough the importance of partnerships. You want to partner with organizations and agencies that will directly connect you with the families. You want to partner with the families to make sure you're responding to their needs. Parents from these populations, they have an active voice. You want to make sure that you can hear their voice and get their feedback as you make plans for programmatic issues. And dialogue. You want to have continuing communication between all the parties. There are lots of competing interests, lots of different funding issues, but you want to be able to seek out and listen to diverse perspectives when you're trying to connect with hard-to-reach populations. Next slide.
Okay, this is Donald again. We're gonna read out some questions that we had developed for discussion, and time is short. We want to get to the questions that you've been sending in, but we also want to throw out these questions, and if there's time, obviously people can raise their hand to discuss them. But I would also encourage, we have, I believe, contact information coming for all of us. Right. We would definitely like to hear some ongoing discussion about
Yeah.
other partnerships that have been successful, your perspectives on what you've heard, et cetera, et cetera. And we thought these questions would be useful in helping to shape that ongoing discussion.
Yeah.
So
Actually,
the first
we
one
have
is
3 questions, right, on the panel, right? Can you see them?
4, yeah.
We have a question. We have 4 from Paula Willis,
Oh.
Diane Perry, and Joarlina Estrella. We have 3
Oh,
questions.
I was talking about the questions on the slide.
Right. And yes, but since we're very short on time, people can we can address these questions, and then the ones that are on the chat box too.
Okay. Did you want me to read the questions here, or?
Yes, please do.
I'll read the question.
People have them, but.
I'll read the
Okay,
question. We have the first question is from Paula Wills, and it says, should parent centers include rights of incarcerated parents in our special education IDEA training, or is this its own training?
I think that's for Michelle.
I think it's actually a combination of both. I think if you're trying to give a quick overview, you can include it in an overall special education training, but there are a lot of particulars. I've done it both ways. Sometimes I include it as part of a training around special education, and sometimes I've actually broken it out and done a whole training on the rights of incarcerated parents. It can work both ways. And I have PowerPoints that I can share if people want that, in terms of an individual email to me at the end of the presentation.
Okay, great, thank you. Diane Perry asks, are the laws on the DOE website specific by the state, or are there federal laws specific for parents' rights who are incarcerated?
There's a combination of state laws in New York City for incarcerated parents, but there are also federal laws too.
Okay. Jorlina Estrella asks, how do you reach out to those families that are not computer savvy or don't have emails?
I think that's good for Alfonso, right?
Well, I think a variety of methods. I think social media, as Michelle just said, is one. We're also finding that people do have access to text messages. They may not be using email, but the digital divide has changed over time, and most people have text messages. So having the software to generate multiple texts can be helpful.
Thank you, Donna. I think we can move to the final slides, because we're really short on time. And I think we have some handouts, right? I think Michelle's gonna share, describe them.
The handout 1 is the tips for working with incarcerated parents, and it's also on our website. And it lists contact names, it lists the basic laws that oversee the rights of incarcerated parents. And then the second handout is the actual designee form. That's the form that you use if you're trying to assign an educational designee. Sometimes, despite our best efforts, birth parents still can't participate. And so if you sign the educational designee form and get it notarized, you assign someone to represent the birth parent when they're having IEP meetings or any school issues that come up. Somebody who's not incarcerated, like a trusted family member or trusted family friend. So that's the educational designee form. And in worst case scenario, sometimes parents, they might not want to participate, and a court can assign a surrogate parent. But I try to use the educational designee form first.
And Michelle, Wanda Santiago asked if this only applies to New York.
The educational designee form is national. It doesn't matter where you go, because if you're in foster care, you still have a right to have a surrogate parent or an educational designee, either or. Surrogate parent, normally the school district will assign a surrogate parent, Or if that doesn't work, then you can go to court, and through the child's attorney, they can assign a surrogate parent. That's usually for parents who are more uncooperative, but I find the educational designee form is like the first step, so you don't have to go to court.
I think,
Right. There's also the designation of a person in parental relation, which is New York specific, and probably other states have something comparable, but not necessarily.
the follow-up question is, what about incarcerated parents?
Sorry?
What about incarcerated parents? I guess that's related to the previous question.
The educational designee form, that can be used by an incarcerated parent who wants to assign someone to speak out on their behalf. So they're assigning someone on a temporary basis, usually for up to 6 months, and that person can represent them when they're at an IEP meeting or they're trying to get access to records. It's like a form that gives someone who's not, within the facility to kind of act on the birth parent's behalf. The birth parent's rights are still maintained. They're just, they just need someone to help them make educational decisions. Because sometimes, despite our best efforts, it's hard making phone calls or getting emails through a system. And so the actual person who's outside, who's not incarcerated, they'll represent the parent.
Okay.
They stand in their shoes, so to speak, with that form, and you submit the form to the school, and they know that they have an educational designee. But as Dawn said, sometimes you do have.
Thank you, Michelle. Yeah, in addition to the handouts that Michelle described, we also have on the panel today's presentation. The PowerPoint is there, so you can download it. And the contact information for each one of the presenters is on your screens right now. You can see them, and you can contact them individually, right?
So this is Josie, and the final handout is the Reaching Native Youth with Disabilities, really good handout. And as was mentioned, all of their email addresses have been included on this final page. There were some questions for discussion that we just didn't have time to get to, and I'm really sorry, but we tried to put so much information into this session that, it's so important for us to know this, that, I hope that once this webinar is released and captioned on YouTube, which should happen very quickly, we'll send you the link. And if you look at those questions for discussion, if there's a piece on there that you want to know more about, I'm sure that you could contact any of us, and we'd love to talk more about it, or refer you to somebody else that might have additional information. I want to really thank our presenters today. They provide such valuable information, and I really appreciate the work that they put into this. As you can see, our website is directly above their contact info. It's raisecenter.org. Right now, it is being reconstructed to have more resources for everyone. It's still functional, but we'll be releasing an updated, newer, greater version within the coming month or so. So within the next hour or less, you will be getting an email with a survey to take about this webinar and the experience. Our next webinar is by the National Disability Rights Network, and it is on, I'm double checking this, it will be on March 13th at 2:30 Eastern time as well. If you signed up for this webinar, then you will also get information, a flyer about that webinar as well. Hopefully you can join us. And I appreciate all of you joining, and I hope that you have a lovely Tuesday and a good Valentine's Day. And have a good one, everyone. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Have a great day.
Bye. Thank you.